Our first guest tonight is an Emmy-nominated actor, writer, and musician. He's currently starring in What Happens Later, which is in theaters November 3rd. Let's take a look.
Still a music snob. Oh, jeez. Remember you used to hide my CDs when our friends came over? Hey, when our friends came over, you used to hide my CDs.
One CD, one time, the Partridge Family Christmas album, and I did that to spare you the humiliation.
Oh, so my taste in music was humiliating.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah? To who?
To you.
No, not to me. To you.
To me. And to you.
Please welcome back to the show our friend David Duchovny, everybody. Take a seat.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you here.
It's nice to be back, Seth.
You get to be in a romantic comedy with Meg Ryan.
I know.
She directed it as well.
I know.
Shot
I know
it.
These things.
You
Yeah.
shot it. Yeah, these are. I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
Really, I did? Woo!
Good time to be David Duchovny.
Yeah.
You shot most of it in an airport.
Yeah, now it gets worse.
Well,
As you
Meg did not do herself any favors because it's not easy to shoot a movie in an airport.
No, because, well, it was a regional airport, so it did shut down at like 9 o'clock, which is when we did most of our shooting. But we also had to shoot sometimes during the day, and they're just people going to and from, wherever they're going.
So it's a working airport. It's not an abandoned airport.
And I don't know if you know this, but it's illegal to tell anybody to do anything in an airport. I've never tried to do it before, but like you can't say, Seth, can you just sit there for a moment while David and Meg shoot this scene? And you're like, no, I've got to get to my gate.
Interesting.
Can't do it.
So there's no crowd control.
Zero.
And if I want to come over and be like, I'm a big fan of both of you while you're filming, I'm allowed to do that?
That's familiar because that happened. Yeah, we would do these. There's like long walk and talk scenes in this movie, like 8 pages, and we'd just be strolling through the airport, and you know, people would recognize Meg or they recognize me, and I remember we came after like 7 pages, and we're just like high wire acting it like. We got it. We did 7 pages. We're there. We're finally at the stop point. And this guy goes, hey, it's Meg Ryan. And I was like, I was in the middle of my line. I just said, that's not helpful. and then I was back here, and Meg was like, that was amazing. You just like, I thought it was pretty polite. That's not helpful.
It's very polite. I also want to give a break to a traveler at a regional airport in Arkansas. I don't blame them for being a little thrown by the fact that Duchovny and Meg Ryan are coming down the way.
No, it just wasn't helpful.
Yeah. You're right. You know what?
Yeah.
I think it was you gave him a very honest, fair...
I wasn't saying you're an ass. I'm just saying you're not being helpful.
Where do you, what is a dressing room situation when you're shooting in an airport?
I was in a yoga room. This was a fancy
The Fayetteville Airport has a yoga room.
It had a yoga room.
Now, did people, is the idea that they'll do yoga?
Well, I call it a yoga room. It was a room.
Yeah.
There was nothing else in there that said yoga.
Okay.
But it was called a yoga room.
Oh,
but
wow.
It was my room. Nobody came in to do yoga while I was there.
Okay.
And I didn't do any yoga in there, but it was sweet. There was no gong, there was no foam roller, but
yeah. Otherwise, there was just an air of yoga about it.
It smelled more of Cinnabon.
Okay,
to be honest with you.
I mean, I think almost every room in an airport is kind of a Cinnabon room, if there's. Yeah.
I prefer that to rank human sweat.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you know what?
Anytime.
Sold.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. I know you grew up in New York City,
Yes.
Lower East Side, right?
Yeah.
And you now.
Yeah. Sioux Falls.
Sioux Falls.
I grew up in Sioux Falls.
How? We're about. It's trick or treating tomorrow. What was trick or treating like growing up in New York City?
Fraught.
Yeah. Was it as bad as I might think it was in that era?
Yeah, I mean, well, you wanted to find a big building because then you could just get in and get out.
Yeah.
You could do, 100 apartments, and you'd have your loot, and you'd go home for the year. But the older kids also knew that was going on, and they would lay in wait for the younger kids. They were super lazy, and they would just let us go and get all the candy, and then we'll take that.
So you got candy mugged as a kid in New York City?
Sure did. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. And one time, trick or treat, it's trick or treat, but you never think of the treat, right? I mean, you never think of the trick.
Yeah, you assume the treat is implied. You forget that you've also asked for a trick.
Right. So I remember knocking on this door, and this old lady must have been like 80 years old. Opened it. I say she's 80, but I was like 8, so she might have been 35. And and then I said, trick or treat, and she was like, trick. And she just turned and did a somersault. And then she was like, you. I was like, I'll take my candy. It's like, no, you gotta do the trick. So then I did a somersault, and she gave me my candy. And
Wow.
Then I got mugged for the candy.
And you said to those bullies, you're like, you owe me a somersault.
Yeah, let's see some somersaults.
Are you in your apartment now? Or do people come by your door? Like, are you one of the?
Well, they did when I lived in New York. I don't live
Yeah.
in New York anymore.
Gotcha.
Yeah. In L.A., no, nobody comes by.
No. So it's just a regular
Drive by, drive the 8-year-old behind the wheel. Trick or treat. Trick or treat.
And you just try to throw a Reese's through the open window? Yeah.
Sorry.
You're going on tour with your band.
Yeah.
A European tour.
Yeah.
This is very exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Have you ever done it before through Europe?
Yeah, we've gone through Europe and Eastern Europe, and this is our second time touring through Europe. And you know, I've tried to get no offense to your wonderful drummer today, but
Yeah.
Fred.
Yeah. You've tried to get Fred to drum for you?
I can't get any play out of Fred. Fred is
Really? Because Fred says yes to everybody. This is shocking. He is not. I mean, he is one of my most talented and least discerning friends.
Wow. I love Fred so much. I did a movie with him, and because he's one person who, and you can corroborate this or not, you're not sure if he's making fun of you all the time.
That's true. Yeah.
But he's not. He's a lovely, sweet guy. But
He's a lovely,
you have a
authentic
sneaking
person, but you never fully
suspicion
trust it. Yeah.
that he's making fun of you, and I don't know how he does that.
The other thing you can be very confident with Fred is even if you have the most wonderful conversation with him, he will walk away having like the best impression of you that
Oh, really?
he's ever had.
I
Like he
haven't
just
seen
absorbs a person's essence, and then
I'm
he can
gonna
just
have
like.
to check that out.
Can I ask some questions because these are photos of you as you were a front man, and this is very rock and roll, David. I'm very proud of you.
So embarrassing.
This I don't know. This strikes me as less rock and roll because that's you. You're on the bottom here.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you get a good guitarist, if you're lucky enough to get a good guitarist in your band, you got to treat him well.
Yeah.
And so I carry him around the entire tour. That's what I do. I carry him on my shoulders. I do it for you too, if you're.
Okay. And you have some drummers. You have some. You've mentioned guitarists, but there's some drummers back there who.
My band is so big that I have Ben Stiller on the drums.
Yeah. So how did you get Ben Stiller to drum for you?
I just asked him.
And he said yes, and Fred said no.
Ben was terrific. He came and rehearsed a little bit, and then we were. It was for the Tribeca Film Festival, and I have my drummer, and then at some point, I said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. My drummer has pulled a hamstring. Is there a drummer in the house?" And then people raise their hand, and then like, "Oh, this guy," and it was Ben.
So there were other drummers in the house?
Well, you know, there's always. Like, is there a drummer in the house here? Yeah, you see that?
Yeah.
There is always going to be a drummer in the house. Yeah.
Now you shot this film in a airport,
Yeah.
and you do not care for flying. Are you still a superstitious flyer, or have you gotten over
Not
it?
so much anymore, but when I was young, before I was acting, I would if I got on a flight where there was a famous person, I would be I would think, oh, this plane's not going down because that would be weird. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't happen all the time.
So you feel more confident if there's a celebrity on your plane,
Yeah, Tony Danza, like this isn't going down.
right?
And then when I started to get famous, I thought, oh, people are looking at me like, I got to keep this thing up. And I was just imagine, like, if the plane started to have trouble and go down, everybody's like, it's you, you're not famous enough. Duchovny, you bastard, you weren't famous enough.
You had a film at Tribeca. Was it being a New Yorker growing up here? Is it special to have a movie premiere out here?
It was amazing. I mean, just walking around neighborhoods that I grew up in and thinking, you know, just how life changes and grows, and just neighborhoods that I was a kid in, and now I'm doing these things, and it's just a rich feeling for me.
Well, it's very nice.
Not funny, but rich.
Yeah. Not everything has to be funny, David. You're allowed some richness in your life.
I can't. If I got to keep that plane up, I got to be funny.
You still have your undefeated record.
I do.
So let me check this. I checked your Wikipedia. Not one of your planes has crashed. Is that correct?
No,
Wow.
I'm doing well.
Really good, yeah.
doing well.
It's always such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much, buddy. Have a great tour.